This CEO is facing 40 years in prison after he raised $50 million for his app, which he claimed to be powered by AI. But as it turns out, it might have just been hundreds of people working in call centers in the Philippines instead.
So our technology is basically robotic process automation with a layer of AI on top of it. And what that means is that every time that you ask Nate to buy something for you, Nate is able to go to that website, understand the HTML code, and take actions on your behalf.
Well, that was a lie. I mean, the fact that this man raised $50 million to have people working in call centers in the Philippines, LARPing as AI, is flat out outrageous. But meet Albert Sanager, the former CEO of Nate, who has just been charged with fraud by the Department of Justice for what seems to be one of the most evident AI scams we've seen up to date. And definitely, this story isn't just one of those, my app uses some basic automation, but I'm calling it AI. No. Obviously, those are way more common now. But this is one of those, I told my investors my app was powered by revolutionary AI when it was just hundreds of underpaid workers in a call center type of fraud. And it all seemed to be propped up with investor money and feel-good ads like this one selling the concept. I mean, hey, they went all in. While it's an interesting concept, the way Albert went around running this app has him facing 2 20-year prison sentences for the scheme. So Nate is an app that was founded in 2018, and from the beginning, it promised something that could be pretty revolutionary in the retail industry. It claimed to be a universal shopping cart that will let you buy anything from any online store with just one single tap.
Albert, what is Nate doing to offer consumers and retailers an alternative to the big e-commerce platforms, Amazon and Alibaba?
Nate is the first unified shopping experience. So as a consumer, having a Nate account allows you to share and shop your world without compromising your data. You could download the app today, set up your wallet, and use it to save or buy any product from any retailer and share shopping lists with your friends.
So imagine you're scrolling through some random website and you see a pair of shoes you like, or some clothes, hoodie, shirt, pants, or basically anything. Instead of going through the whole checkout process, filling out your shopping information, payment details, and all of that, you just hit the button in the Nate app and that's it, order completed. The key selling point here that Nate's proprietary AI technology would automatically handle everything, selecting sizes, entering your payment information, confirming the purchase, literally the whole checkout flow across any e-commerce website. But then on top of that, they also mixed in this social aspect where you could buy a shirt for your friend through Nate. And if they were registered with Nate, they would then automatically get the correct size and it would be sent to their address without you even getting any of that information. Actually, this is a pretty good idea. It's just a shame that it was seemingly ran by an absolute grifter. But obviously, that idea, you're probably thinking that might sound a little bit too complicated to do automatically across thousands of different websites with different layouts and checkout processes back in 2018, especially when we consider where AI technology stood then. And if you thought that, yeah, you would definitely be right, because as it turns out, no magical AI was doing any of this. Because according to the Department of Justice, what was happening behind the scenes was that Sanager, he had hired hundreds of purchasing assistants at a call center in the Philippines who were manually completing all these orders. So every time a user tapped that buy button thinking that some advanced AI would be handling their purchase, in reality, no, not so much. It was just a real human on the other side of the world filing out these forms, and Sanager kept this fact hidden from basically everyone, including most of his employees, claiming that the automation data, that was a trade secret and it couldn't be shared. And if you're wondering what the app's actual automation rate was, well, according to the DOJ investigation, it was nothing more than 0%. I mean, come on, it would be slightly better if they were using people to fill in the gaps on like less common shopping websites or something like that. But for Nate to actually have 0% of transactions automatically done, that's just straight up diabolical. Especially when their CEO is on all these podcasts saying, we're using proprietary AI technology to fulfill all of this stuff. I mean, that is just highway theft to these investors. The audacity of Albert here is just laughably stupid.
I had to build sort of a research lab because we were tackling a problem that had not been solved before. I am technical enough to know who to hire
but that's sort of the extent of it. And so my first hire was not an engineer, it was actually a data scientist who's currently our chief scientist. He's phenomenal and worked with me for a few months. And then we hired our first engineer and then our second, and then we just kept building the team. But it was a lot of sort of trial and error for a long time until we figured out that we were able to crack it.
And by crack it, that's when he realized that they could just pawn all this off to some Filipino call center and call it AI. But this didn't stop him from going on to all these podcasts like he's some genius.
So I founded Nate with a fundamental principle that we would only use machine learning in the execution of tasks and not in the decision making. When you save an item to your Nate app, Nate goes to that website and extracts information such as the picture, the price, the options. When you hit buy, Nate goes to a website and executes the purchase for you.
Right. So that was also a lie, and by it, you mean someone in a call center somewhere. But somehow, obviously, it got worse, because when it was revealed that he raised over $50 million with this lie, I mean, what do you even say to that? Over $50 million was spent on a fancy interface for a call center operation. This isn't Theranos level scale of fraud, but it's definitely up there. We're at about, I don't know, like 7% of the full scale of the Theranos fraud, which is still massive, clearly. And these weren't small investments from random people. They were major venture capital firms handing over millions of dollars based on the promises of groundbreaking technology, including Coacher Management and Forerunner Ventures, which both are multi-billion-dollar firms. But Albert occasionally admitted that there were some edge cases where AI might fail, but he insisted that most transactions were fully automated. But in reality, 100% of these transactions were being handled manually. And obviously, there's been suspicions about Nate's actual capabilities for a while now. Back in 2022, The Information published an article suggesting that Nate might have exaggerated tech capabilities for its investors. And this all happened during the pandemic e-commerce boom when fintech startups were super hot and investors just throwing money at anything that looked promising. However, it's taken until now for the FBI and the Department of Justice to gather enough evidence to bring charges. According to the indictment, Saninger did try to develop AI technology for his app. He acquired some tech from a third party and hired developers to work on it, but they never managed to get it working well enough to handle transactions. I mean, if only he sold this as like a remote shopper assistant app and not AI, he wouldn't be facing these insane charges. But instead of admitting his failure, he just kept the manual operation, claiming it was all AI powered. And this is where I guess the fake it till you make it startup mentality crosses the line into criminal fraud. Because Saninger is now facing one count of securities fraud and another count of wire fraud, both which carry a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Potentially, he'll receive a total of 40 years in prison if he receives consecutive sentences. Acting U.S. Attorney Matthew Podolsky said Albert Saninger misled investors by exploiting the promise to allure an AI technology to build false narrative around innovation that never existed. This type of deception not only victimizes innocent investors, it diverts capital from legitimate startups, makes investors skeptical of real breakthroughs, and ultimately impedes the progress of AI development. And the FBI Assistant Director Christopher G. Raya was equally assertive, saying that Albert Saninger allegedly defrauded investors with fabrications of his company's purported artificial intelligence capabilities while covertly employing personnel to satisfy the illusion of technical automation. Saninger allegedly abused the integrity associated to his former position as the CEO to perpetuate a scheme filled with smoke and mirrors. And this story is particularly interesting right now because we're in the middle of this massive AI hype cycle. Because, every company is slapping AI on everything they can, whether they're actually using any meaningful artificial intelligence or not. But there's a big difference between a company exaggerating what their basic automation tools can do and flat out lying about having AI tech when you're just using human labor in a foreign country on the other side of the world. I mean, even Amazon was caught doing something like this in their just walk out stores where you essentially, grab your items and walk out without checking out, and your Amazon account gets charged later on. Apparently, they used to at least rely on a lot of people watching the footage manually and charging people accordingly. But this was back in 2021, so I'm unsure if this is still the case. But that's seemingly one of those moments where they're just using people to fill in the gaps while they're training up the AI. Nate's is very different. But there's a whole term for this practice called the Wizard of Oz experiment, where users are made to think they're interacting with an automated system, when in reality, behind the curtains, it's just some dude there. However, most companies do this as a temporary testing method, not a way to fraudulently raise $50 million while claiming they've solved a massive technical challenge. And I feel like an interesting aspect of this case is from the user's perspective, the app probably worked as advertised. You tap a button and your order gets completed without you having to go through this whole checkout process. So in that way, at least it worked. The users weren't necessarily being scammed here, other than, I guess, having their information viewed by another human and not some encrypted secured checkout, as they were likely assuming based on how the CEO was pitching it.
So as a consumer, having a Nate account allows you to share and shop your world without compromising your data.
Psych. I know I used that clip earlier, but it's pretty entertaining. But back to my point, it was the investors who lost big from being deceived on how that convenience was being delivered. A fully automated AI solution would scale into millions of users with way less additional costs compared to a call center with human workers that scales, linearly. More users means more workers, training, and management overhead. So while the product might have worked fine for some users in the short term, the business model seemed unsustainable compared to what was being promised. Also, it just doesn't look good on paper to be investing into some potential online shopping checkout sweatshop. And obviously, we don't know if it was a sweatshop or not yet, but if the users scaled rapidly, and they had to rapidly scale the amount of people that were doing the back-end stuff, that's how you get into sweatshop territory pretty quickly. For one thing, the technical challenge Nate was claiming to have solved sounds like something that was really tough. I mean, building an AI that can navigate any e-commerce site, understand different checkout flows, fill out forms correctly, and then handle all the edge cases, that was a massive challenge back in 2018. Probably still is now. It's the kind of problem that even the biggest tech companies in the world, with thousands of engineers and billions in R&D, hadn't solved by then. I don't know if they've even solved that by now. So the idea that this small startup had cracked this problem completely should have raised some eyebrows. It's not impossible, but you gotta be wary apparently. But the US Securities and Commodities Task Force and the Complex Fraud and Cybercrimes Unit are handling this case. Given the amount of money involved and the deliberate nature of deception, it seems unlikely that he'll just get off with a slap on the wrist. But who knows? Funny things can happen in the world of white-collar crime. But hey, other than that, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.